Not found on any map, there's a small abandoned town tucked neatly away from prying eyes and unwanted visitors. This town isn't your run-of-the-mill ghost town by any means. Stories of this town only exist in whispers, passed down for hundreds of years through the generations. It is said that the town was once fertile ground, but the deeds of man changed that, turning it into a monster, passing judgment on those who deserve it. The only way to find this town? Well, you'll see. Before I move on, if you're a fan of paranormal horror and twisted stories, hit the subscribe button now. It really does help my channel grow. Now, let's get back to the story.
James Wallace, a man in his early 30s, finishes another monotonous day at the office. Known for his uncomfortable, often inappropriate jokes, he tries to mask his deep-seated insecurities with humor. Today he jokes about hitting a pedestrian and driving off, much to the discomfort of his colleagues. They exchange uneasy glances, whispering among themselves that James is not just unfunny, but also untrustworthy. His dark humor and occasional bouts of cruelty have left them wary, sensing there's something more sinister lurking beneath his exterior. As James leaves the office building, the sun sets behind a thick bank of clouds, casting an ominous yellow glow over the city. Climbing into his car, he begins the monotonous drive home, where he will play out the rest of his day in a lonely existence, unaware of the horror awaiting him. He turns on the radio and it crackles with static before settling on a haunting old tune that makes the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. As James drives deeper into the countryside, the roads narrow and the fog thickens, swirling like ghostly fingers around his car. He flicks on his high beams, but they only reflect the dense whiteness, blinding him further. Snowflakes begin to fall, silent and heavy, transforming the world into a muffled, claustrophobic nightmare. James curses under his breath, frustration turning to unease. The road ahead is a maze, twisting and turning until he realizes he has no idea where he is. The radio fades out, replaced by unsettling whispers that make him shiver. The song continues as he tries desperately to turn off his radio, with no success. James's car skids on the icy road, nearly colliding with the tree. James takes a deep breath and tries to calm himself as panic begins setting in. He eases his car back onto the road and takes what he hopes is a shortcut. The fog closes in even tighter, a suffocating shroud. The snow and wind intensify, creating a world that he doesn't recognize anymore. The twists and turns have left him confused, on the brink of panic, but soon he finds himself driving through what appears to be an old abandoned town. The buildings are decrepit, their windows shattered and doors hanging ajar like silent sentinels watching him. A sense of dread washes over him as he realizes how isolated and vulnerable he is. He tries to find comedy in his situation by declaring this town to be another backwater shithole. He chuckles to himself, but his intended joke doesn't ease his tension. Just then, his car stops just inside town, as if controlled by an unseen force. His engine refuses to come back to life as he tries over and over to turn the key. He pounds the steering wheel, grasping it and shouting obscenities. Regaining his composure, James opens his door and steps out of his car, the cold air biting into his skin. The silence is eerie, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath his shoes. With each step he takes, the night seems to get darker. Unsettled and desperate to get back on the road, he trudges deeper into the town to see if there is any help to be given. James Wallace, a man who would pass by a helpless motorist as they sit stranded on the side of the road, now looks for assistance. He wanders through the town hoping to find help, but but the streets are deserted. An old diner catches his eye, its neon sign flickering weakly. It looks to be a newer addition to this town that time forgot. It has electric. There has to be someone around, he says under his breath. He pushes open the door, the creak echoing through the empty space. The bell above the door jingles with an unusually low, ringed sound, as if to call out to the town that they have a new guest. Inside the diner, the air is stale and thick with dust. Tables and chairs overturned, as if the place was abandoned in a hurry. The intercom plays an eerie song which James recognizes from the radio in his car. He spots an old rotary phone and rushes to it, but the line is dead. Suddenly, a loud crash comes from the kitchen. Heart pounding, but desperate for help, he investigates, only to find a dark, humanoid figure darting into the shadows. His breath catches in his throat, and he stumbles backwards. He rubs his eyes, believing they were playing tricks on him. As he moves his hands from his eyes, he sees it again. He gasps and slowly walks backward toward the door, realizing that whatever this is in the diner with him is not human. James flees the kitchen, his mind racing. He hears the stomping of heavy feet chasing him, but it abruptly stops as he exits the diner. Outside, the snow shimmers, but the town looks different. He walks into the street and turns around to see that the diner is now gone. He looks down to see the snow that had covered his previous tracks, the wind whipping the powder into drifts along the street. Realizing he can't stand there, he picks up a direction and hurriedly paces forward. The snow thrashes his face so hard it burns his eyes and cheeks. Pulling his sport coat up over his neck, he keeps his head down to avoid the pain. Looking up frequently to check his bearing through the limited visibility, he walks straight into a man, colliding, almost falling from the collision. The man stumbles. He looks haggard and worn, his eyes haunted. Fear has overcome him deep within his soul. The man brushes himself off and helps steady James on his feet. He takes a moment, both men just eyeing each other. Then the man reaches out his hand and with a single shaky word proclaims his name as Edgar. He tells James all he can, obviously eager to see another living person. Edgar claims to have been trapped in the town for years, surviving by avoiding the dark entities that haunt the living. He explains that other living beings have come throughout the years, but have long since vanished. He offers to show James how to survive, leading him to an old church that serves as his sanctuary. As they walk through the abandoned streets, the fog seems to whisper their names. Shadows move at the edges of their vision, and the cold intensifies. Suddenly, a piercing scream shatters the silence, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching them rapidly. James and Edgar run, narrowly escaping the clutches of a grotesque, shadowy entity with glowing red eyes and long, skeletal fingers. They reach the safety of the church just in time, slamming the door behind them. Inside the church, Edgar explains the town's curse. The dark entities are souls of the damned, drawn to the despair and fear of those who stumble into their realm. He teaches James survival techniques, how to detect the entities by their cold presence, and the importance of avoiding certain areas where the entities are strongest. Despite the terror, James finds a strange camaraderie with Edgar, believing they might find a way out together. Edgar speaks of a place in the heart of the town where the entity's power is concentrated, the source of the paranormal activity. He suggests that confronting this source might be their only chance of escape. Desperate, but a bit apprehensive, James agrees, and they set off through the haunted streets. The fog thickens, the snow deepens, the whispers grow louder, and shadows seem to reach out for them, a living nightmare. They pass by an old cemetery where gravestones are cracked and overgrown, and the air feels colder, thicker with malevolent energy. As they approach the mansion, The number of entities increases. Dark, twisted figures materialize from the fog, their hollow eyes fixated on James. One entity grabs him, its icy grip sending a jolt of pain through his arm. Edgar throws salt at the creature and it recoils with an unearthly shriek. They run, but more entities emerge, clawing at their clothes and flesh, leaving deep, painful gashes. James' fear turns to sheer panic as he realizes the entities are herding him toward the mansion. They arrive at the decrepit mansion, its facade twisted and broken. Inside, the air is freezing, and the walls are covered in strange symbols and decaying wallpaper. Edgar's demeanor changes. His voice becomes resonant, echoing with an eerie, otherworldly quality. He reveals that he is not a survivor, but the town's gatekeeper, a dark entity in disguise. He has been leading James to his doom, orchestrating his every move. Realizing the trap too late, James tries to flee, but the mansion comes alive with dark entities, their forms shifting and writhing. The whispers turn into screams and shadows claw at him from every corner. Edgar watches with a malevolent grin, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. He reveals that James was chosen because of his past. A hit-and-run accident years ago that claimed an innocent life. The town is purgatory for those with blood on their hands, and James's fate was sealed the moment he entered the fog. The entities close in, their cold hands pulling James into the darkness. His screams are swallowed by the void, and the mansion consumes him. In the real world, his car is found abandoned on a desolate road, covered in snow. His existence is erased from the memories of his friends, family, and colleagues. It's as if James Wallace never existed. As the story of James Wallace ends, the fog begins to roll in again, this time surrounding another unsuspecting traveler. This cycle continues, and the town waits for its next victim.
If you've enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, like the video, leave a comment down below. If there's a certain kind of story you want to hear, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you, and until the next time, stay weird.